But how did you so you knew what you wanted, you went straight into reporting, or did you have a bit of a journey there?
I didn't really want to be a reporter, actually. I wanted to be a producer because I noticed that I didn't really want to be on TV, but then also I noticed, like, when I would do my internships, that the people who came in and said that they wanted to be on TV were always put in sort of, I don't know, wardrobe or something not fun, getting coffee. And if you said you wanted to be a producer, which in the newsroom is like, I want to work versus I just want to be a celebrity, then you get to do cool
Yeah.
stuff. So I was like, well, I want to be a producer, and it worked. I did get to do a lot of really cool things. And I think it helped me get my next internship and my next internship. So by the time I was right out of college, I was producing for Fox News Channel's morning show, Fox and Friends, and I was there for a year and then left to go to I decided I didn't want to be in television anymore because I didn't really like being a producer, but at the time it didn't hit me that the reason I didn't like being a producer was because producers are kind of like, they stay in the newsroom. They're a little sort of vampire-y in that way. They don't like come out in daylight and like meet new people and stuff. And they like to control things. So they sort of usually have a bird's eye view of the show, and they tell you what to do. And I hate telling people what to do. I don't want to know what anyone else is doing, really. I have no interest in that. And I don't like being in an office. And so at the time, though, I didn't think, well, why don't you try being a reporter, stay in the business, but try being a reporter. So I thought, well, the next best thing would be, I want to be a psychologist. So I decided to actually get a master's degree in theology and psychology. I got a master of divinity degree. I went to seminary for 3 years at Boston University School of Theology. And then my plan was to do a PhD in psychology and be a therapist. But I had one really good professor who noticed how screwed up I was and recommended I go to therapy, which then made me realize I don't want to be a therapist anymore. And then also, I had a great preaching professor who, in one of his lectures, made me start thinking about journalism, and the responsibility that journalists have, which I had started to notice was kind of deteriorating. So I decided to just try it out, go back to the news business as a reporter, see if I liked it. And that was it. I just quit in 2019, and here I am today. I don't know what I do now, but it's something affiliated with that.
None of us do. Why did you quit?
I quit for two reasons. One was because I was starting to wake up to how crappy my reporting was, in large part due to the fact that I just did not have the time and resources to do a good job. A lot of people don't realize that reporters, they go from one big topic to the next big topic to the next big topic, and they have very little time to understand what they're talking about. But they're also told that they somehow are these experts, these like mini experts.
Mm.
So they live with this false sense of competency about the subjects that they're reporting on, and they never really learn enough to realize that actually they don't know what they're talking about. But when you start covering a beat, you have the opportunity to see, like, wait a second, because you cover it day in and day out. And so over time, you if you're paying attention, you realize that there's a whole world of information out there that you're not tapping into. And so when I started covering the environment, it took a couple years, but I was getting into like alternative media, and I was hearing different opinions on climate change, for instance, and on government regulation, whether that's the best thing or the worst thing, like how corporations, for instance, are somehow able to skirt the rules. So is it really about the environment, or is it about lobbying and money and politics and all that stuff? And so when I started to realize that it wasn't as cut and dry as like, you question climate change regulation, therefore you hate the environment, which was the way that a lot of people, and especially in Seattle, which is where I was reporting, that's the way people looked at it. Then I started saying, well, I can't go on television anymore and act like I'm an expert. And I just feel like if you let me go on and say, hey, I only had 2 hours today to figure this out, so I don't really know what I'm talking about, take it with a grain of salt. If they would let me say that at the beginning of every report, I would be fine.
Wouldn't that
That's
be
my
so
biggest issue.
refreshing though to hear Brian
It would
Stelter,
have been.
who's no longer with us, who knows where he is? Same place where Matt Lauer's. I don't know where he went, but like if they were just like, "Hey, yeah, I really don't know that much about this, but from what I've read in
Right.
2 hours, here we go."
Right. I'm telling you, I mean, it would make a big difference. And that's to me the thing that if I like ran a newsroom, there are a couple things I would do differently, but that's one. I would open the newscast instead of the most trusted name in news or with the most accurate name in news. Don't trust anybody else. Trust us. I would just be like, we had to get this on by 4. What do you expect? Like that would
What
be
do you want from us?
Yeah, what do you
I would
want, you know?
see, I would trust those people. You're already starting from an honest perspective. What else
Yeah,
would you change
exactly.
if you ran your own newsroom?
Say that again?
What else would you change if you ran your own newsroom other than, like, upfront honesty about lack of expertise?
Yeah. I would make everybody sit in quiet at least for a couple hours once a week. I'd force people to be quiet, and either you could go for a hike or you sit in the corner of the office or something, but you can't talk. You have to do some self reflection. And then the other thing I would do is like weekly, I would pick a topic and I would ask journalists to read through, a couple different story options from different perspectives, and not just like different mainstream perspectives, alternative viewpoints. And then tell me, see, this is what I would do in journalism school if I ever taught too. But so I guess I would just wish I had had a manager who did this when I was, because I never, I never was. Then again, I was a history major, but I don't think I would have learned this in journalism school because my peers didn't and they studied journalism, where you'd say, okay, who do you want to win in this the way this is being written out, this is the good guy and this is the bad guy according to this outlet. Who do you identify with and why? Like, what is the reaction, your natural, gut reaction to my 2-year-old is walking into my office right now. And my
Aw.
husband is getting her. So she's, hi, honey. Anyway, so now she's under my desk and it's going to
I
go
would
south. Anyway,
I love that clip of, like, what was it, the guy on CNN where, like, his 2 kids, like, walk into the room, and it's like they're so goofy, and then, like, the mom comes in, like, and rips them
yeah, I
away and
know. It's
shuts the door.
so sweet. It's okay, Lily. Yeah. Yeah, no, she comes on my show all the time, but that was a quick grab by my husband, so I have to give him credit for that one. Um, anyway, yeah, so they just don't promote self-awareness. It's often the exact opposite. It's like we assume that you've come to this profession with some idea about your biases. Like, do you hate your mom or dad, and so you project that onto this person? I mean, what are your problems that you're carrying with you, that you are projecting onto your subject matter material? Because in a profession where you're dealing with interpretation of truth, really, there's no science to it. In a lot of ways, it is an art, and it requires that you be a healthy individual. That's why I'm actually looking back on it first. I'm like, why did I go to seminary? That was kind of dumb. I mean, what am I what am I doing here? But I realized that, like, I did 2 years of therapy and I read some of the greatest philosophers of all time, and I thought through some of the biggest topics, like death, what happens when you die, like what's the purpose of life, all these big things that I don't think the average reporter has really sat down and struggled with. And when you get to the opposite side of that, it's kind of like you're free. You're not trying to sell anything anymore. You've settled a lot of these scores with yourself and with God, and so you're just like, I don't have to win. I'm gonna
Mm.
tell you what I found here, and what I think to be the case, but I don't have to win. I don't need to argue with you. I don't need to save you. I don't need you to believe me. I don't care what you do with it. And so you're not codependent anymore with the viewers. And I think, that this idea that somehow, because we're in this profession, we just automatically have the self-awareness to handle that heaviness of a profession, I think is wrong. So I would do the best I could to try to get people to just be regularly quiet with themselves and thinking about what their baggage is that they're bringing into work every day.
It's like, what changed? Like, I remember growing up, I couldn't maybe Dan Rather. I always looked at the news, and of course, like, you're a little kid, you're growing up, the news is boring, and you're not politically activated yet because you don't have a job, you're not paying bills or taxes or anything. But I remember the news was, like, very respected, and it wasn't so much about, like, everyone. They were well known because they were good at what they did, but it wasn't like this fame component where, like, it was like the Don Lemon brand, and it's like, are we and you worked in this industry, so
Yeah.
it's like, do people just become more egotistical, more self-centered? Is it social media, like, just
Media.
making
Yeah, I
every
think
like flaming the celebrity obsession?
I think social media made a big difference, but I don't think it created it. I just think it amplified the issues that were already there because you can now become a brand yourself. And the newsrooms were like, well, let's capitalize on this. Let's hire people who are already bringing a following with them and have a brand, and then they let the monster, genie out of the bottle, and they actually they want you to become more of an egomaniac and to grow that because they think it helps them. You know, maybe in the national world that might work. I'm not convinced in like local news that having somebody who does social media really well is going to help your TV, because people who are really into Instagram influencers, I don't feel like watch the 5 o'clock news. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but they still think that
Yeah.
they started to get rid of anchors and reporters who were kind of there for a long time. I had a friend who got booted because she turned like 42 or something, and they hired a 23-year-old, Instagram influencer, and they're thinking, well, if we get somebody who does Instagram or Twitter and has a big following, then they'll watch the newscast. But it doesn't translate because old people watch the 5 o'clock news. Like, no offense, but usually a 24-year-old Instagram influencer has a following that's not watching the 5 o'clock news. So back to your like original question, when it came to like leaving, I had the competency to start realizing that I was not able to cover what I needed to cover thoroughly enough. And I was never going to have in the format that my position was, I was never going to ever have the time. It just wasn't going to change. So from that digital perspective that we were just talking about, not being an influencer or anything, but I was also getting plugged into this world, this world of podcasting, alternative media. And I was seeing how they were covering the same topics that I was. Now, granted, they're giving their opinion a lot more than I was, and but I actually found it, like you were saying, to be more refreshing and authentic, because even though you were getting more of them, I guess, than you would if you're watching the news, which, because we were told like, don't share your bias. But the problem is it was always leaking into the news anyway. So it was kind of a fake objectivity. So I was like, why don't you let me do something like this for you? So I was an environmental reporter, and all the stations in the Pacific Northwest were taking my content anyway. We had, my company Tegna is one of the largest in the country, and we had a bunch of TV stations in the Northwest, and they were already taking my report. So turned me into a regional correspondent, let me do something like a podcast or a digital version of what this TV version is, which is like 90 seconds, run and gun every day, where I have no time to know what I'm talking about. Let me do something like this. And, it'll get us into the alternative world. It'll also help my journalism, come up to par with where I think it needs to be. I'll have the time and the ability to talk through stuff. And then the other thing was, selfishly, I wanted to get out of the city. My husband and I want a country life, want a homestead. And so we were like, to get out of Seattle, I had to make it so that I wasn't coming into a newsroom every day. So that also would have given me the opportunity to kind of centralize myself in the country, and and have the lifestyle that I wanted. But they thought I was nuts, and so I quit. That's the long story of it.
Now, before you quit, or as you were quitting, did you notice the seeds of, I guess, like censorship? I mean, and like, what was your experience with, like,
Mhm.
okay, you're in the mainstream news world, and then you're beginning this, like, oh, I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to do a podcast. And it's like, so how did you did you see signs of this? Like, and what it kind of inspired you
Mhm.
to have a podcast where censorship is your focus?
Mhm. When people see bias and assume censorship in the legacy press, I would say that 80% of it is self-censorship, or not even, I'm not even sure I would call it censorship, because a lot of folks in the newsrooms are like aligned with the same ideology. So there are very few people who are dissenters and like just quiet there, like, oh, I just probably shouldn't say anything because I'm going to lose my job, or I don't know if I think this is safe and effective, or I don't know if big pharma is really here to help me, or whatever the thing is, and I'm just going to not say anything because they pay 75% of our salaries. That's not how most of them think. Most are just aligned with the ideology. They're manipulated by the same
Wow.
content that they, brainwash us with. And so it wasn't until I started kind of waking up and questioning things that then the direct censorship happened. So the, people always ask, like, what were the things that somebody said you cannot talk about that? And if you had asked me that before this happened to me, I would have told you, no way. My boss would never say that. That's crazy. but it did. So Washington was debating these. This was before COVID, 2019, early 2019. Washington State was debating in the legislature whether to get rid of certain exemptions for kids' vaccine mandates to go to school. And I covered the environment, so I wasn't going to cover the topic, but I was pitched an email by Informed Choice Washington saying that they had some doctors coming to town for a conference and they were going to be talking about this issue. And I had never heard a doctor say that kids should be able to have an exemption and not be forced to have vaccinations to go to school. I had always heard like a mom arguing that versus the
Mm.
Department of Health arguing the opposite. And that to me just seemed like an unfair fight. If you're going to put a doctor with somebody, I would like to see another doctor debate them. I just think that, just because I personally am interested in the issue, again, to go back to what I was saying before, I'm not emotionally attached to the winner. I just want to know what the truth is. I feel like that's journalism, right? So I pitched the email that I got, hey, maybe we should go to this. And remember, I wasn't going to cover it. It was just for them in the newsroom to decide, hey, we want to go to the conference. And my boss called me. When you get the call and they don't put it in writing, it's pretty serious. So he called me and he said,
Yep.
you know, so he said, you are never allowed to pitch or discuss this topic in the newsroom because I do not trust your judgment on this issue, especially if you think this is a worthy story topic. Like you would even listen to Informed Choice Washington, which is like, they're Informed Choice, whatever the state is. They're usually the ones that are aligned with Bobby Kennedy's group, Children's Health Defense,
Yep.
and
Have
they
the
just
book.
give other people a
Yeah.
different perspective. So yeah, so that was one thing. Vaccines were a no-no. You could not talk about vaccines. So you can only imagine like what it was like. I was out of the newsroom, but by the time the COVID
Hmm.
vaccine came around, I'm sure it was nuts. And then the other thing was climate change. If you question the establishment narrative on climate change, you were also psychopathic.
Wow. I'm seeing some very interesting comments in the chat here from Stevie J. Don't share your bias means they're training you to be deceptive. Do you agree with this?
That's a good point. Um, you know, I guess I sort of can agree with you on that one. It would be very difficult in the format of a TV news operation. Maybe if you're writing something for the New York Times, you could do this, but keep in mind we keep stories to 90 seconds. So if I was to take a topic of any kind of complexity and try to tell you what was going on and then also back you up to like, hey guys, just want to let you know, like I have this connection and then I used to think this, but now I think that. And I mean, we never get it on TV. So you really can't do that in the format that is at least corporate television news. Maybe you could have caveats like that when you're writing. And I could see that. I mean, I could see that as helpful. I guess my goal would be that eventually like you don't have to say that because it's not affecting it's not affecting your reporting in a way that would deceive the audience because you're not self-deceiving. But yeah, I mean, if you're at the point where you want to you talk about that and you have the time to do it. I think the problem with TV is like you don't know who's watching podcasts. Everybody's coming back to see you or me and sort of the theme of the podcast. So that they want to stick around for a long time. But television, you don't know who's watching, and the person who likes the A block story may not like the next story in the B block. And you're trying to keep people watching. So you go really fast because their attention span for something they don't like is very short. So that's why like you'll see these really quick stories. We're like, okay, well, we want to keep your attention, but say you hate the story about the fire down the street. We'll have the mayor's press conference coming up next. We'll only bore you for 45 seconds on the fire. Then we'll get to the mayor's press conference. But if you hate that, we have a murder next. So we'll keep the mayor's press conference to a minute and then we'll get you to the murder. And they're just constantly trying to keep your attention and keep you watching to the commercial break. And so there's no time to do any there's no time to do any in-depth exploration on yourself or the subject matter in that kind of format, which is, like I said, then just tell people, hey, we don't think you're going to watch for a long time. So this is a 90-second short version of what you could find online, and even that maybe we're not sure is totally accurate because we just didn't give our reporter that much time.
Love you guys. Thank you for the chats. Thank you for the comments. I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye. Bye. All right. Love you guys. God, I don't even want to leave. This candle smells so good. I don't want to leave. All right. Love you guys. Talk to you soon. Bye. Love you all. Join the Discord. Feet. Love you all. Wow. You guys are awesome. Love you, get it. Bye, guys. Bye. Now I'm really leaving. Love you. Bye.